Roll Tide, everybody. Roll Tide. Man, this is the week, Alabama and Georgia. And this is the game that we've been waiting on. This is a measuring stick game for Coach DeBoer. This is obviously a legacy game for Kirby Smart. It's Alabama against Georgia. And we're going to talk about that here on the show. He's Clint Lamb. I'm Mick Gillispie. Like and subscribe. Thumbs up if you like Alabama content. If you're a Georgia fan, hey, we're going to talk about this game. We're going to be fair, but we roll Tide around here. Clint, good to see you. We're going to hear from the coaches coming up in a few minutes. You and I are going to chew on it afterwards, but the calm before the storm is over, man. Here we go.
Yeah, I'm ready to rock, man. Good bye week last week. Felt like it was, well timed as far as you come off of kind of a positive note against Wisconsin. You still have some things that you've got to get figured out, whether it be run defense, whether it be finding a little bit more offensive consistency. Hopefully, a couple of weeks will give them enough time to do that before they play Georgia. It's going to be a lot of fun covering, though. I know that.
Yeah, well, this is the thing about the college football playoff that has changed stuff is that it's not going to eliminate a team, and I always loved that about college football's regular season is that I always felt like the regular season was a playoff. And that's not the case anymore because you got so many teams that are getting in. With that said, these games still count. And anytime Alabama and Georgia get together, it means something. But this game has a lot of added significance because of what I just said before. Kirby Smart, and you mentioned this, and you were right on. You hit the nail on the head with this. It's like, hey, look, you lose to Alabama. If you're Kirby, you got an Alabama problem. It's not a Nick Saban problem. Everybody had a Nick Saban problem. Or if you're DeBoer and you lose, like people were like, maybe this guy, you start to question that. You recruit it head to head against Georgia all the time. Significant for Alabama recruiting wise and also perception wise.
It absolutely is. I mean, that's kind of to me like the biggest thing is Kalen DeBoer is trying to establish himself in this conference. He's trying to prove that Alabama is still very much in the conversation for not only SEC championships, but college football playoff spots and, national title implications. And this gives him the opportunity to do that. I mean, obviously we've seen, up and down play up to this point, but it's kind of more so understandable. You can't get up and down play against Georgia, though. It's too good of a football team. You've got the home field advantage. You need to be able to take advantage of that. And so, you got to really get things on track this week. Kirby Smart, as you mentioned, the fact that he's kind of trying to get this monkey off his back as far as, having a Nick Saban problem versus having an Alabama problem. And this is a tough test. I think Kentucky's got some question marks. I think Alabama has some question marks, and we're certainly going to find out more this week.
So we're moments away now from the coordinators starting, and then DeBoer, we covered it live. It's been fun. If there's any kind of lull in the action, we'll jump on and talk for a couple minutes, but we want to get you that, and then we're going to stay on afterwards, answer your questions, and talk about what's going on. You're exactly right, Chris. This is Georgia Hate Week. Roll Tide, Norman. And look, Chris, our Auburn friend, yeah, I mean, just showing your face here is acceptable to me. And this is a great time for you, Chris, to go ahead and drop Auburn and roll with the Tide. I mean, it's the same state. You're tired of all the losing. They're on track for their fourth losing season. Jump on with us where the big games are played right here in Tuscaloosa. But good to see you, Chris, too. Hopefully you didn't get that Peyton Thorne tattoo.
Hey, hopefully you didn't get a Hank Brown tattoo either.
Do you think I was watching that one and I kind of felt bad because I think the quarterbacks take a lot more heat than maybe just the entire team's just not that good.
I mean, I think they got a lot more problems than the quarterback. Yeah, don't get me wrong. I mean, when you watch them play, it's just defensively, they're pretty good. They can be pretty good. They're susceptible, to the big plays running from the quarterback. Like, if you're facing a dual threat guy, it adds so much more that you got to account for. And that's really difficult for anybody to an extent. But offensively, they're just a complete mess. And it's kind of like Kalen DeBoer in Alabama, where it's like the offensive side of the football is the side of the football that you would expect to have been figured out. And for Auburn, I just think they're getting much better play on the other side. Offensive line's not blocking great. Quarterbacks aren't making good decisions with the football because even though it is a lot more than just those guys, I mean, when there were opportunities on Saturday for those quarterbacks, and they couldn't take advantage of them. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time talking about Auburn. They're coming on, later this year, but I mean, this is a team that's still kind of in flux.
Well, my whole thing is Alabama needs to be going after Smith and Coleman and some of these other recruits that they've kind of fought Alabama and won here early. I mean, it's still not signing day, but if you're Alabama, you've got to go and say, hey, do you guys want to be part of this, or do you want to be part of what we're doing here? Because there's a clear distinction between what's happening there and what's been going on at Alabama for a long time. Who knows? I mean, is this just still the mess that Brian Harsin left? I don't know. But what I do know is that for Alabama, it's an opportunity to be fighting for the best players in the state, which is something that Nick Saban always seemed to do. He used to go out and fight and win those guys, and that can't change if Alabama wants to continue to dominate, not just recruiting nationally, but recruiting locally. And I think both of those things are really important.
It certainly is important. I mean, and we've talked, me and you have kind of we put a varying degree of importance on the in-state recruiting. We can both agree that it's important. It's just to what extent. But bottom line is that you have to win football games. And we knew if Auburn struggled this year, I mean, their ability to hang on to some of the guys they've already gotten would be a lot more difficult. Doesn't mean that they're going to lose anybody necessarily, but you talk about Deuce Knight, a quarterback who a lot of people feel like is trending towards Auburn. You've got some really good players that were former Alabama commits. It gets that much more difficult to hang on to those guys when you're not playing well. I mean, Caleb Cunningham was in Auburn this past weekend, and he just didn't see what he wanted to see, and that's understandable. I think a lot of Auburn fans can agree with that.
Sorry, Chris. That was Caleb Cunningham's words, not ours.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Chris would disagree with that. I mean, anybody that's wanting Auburn to do well, which isn't too many people in this chat. I mean, it's pretty easy to see that it's a dysfunctional product right now, and I do think that they probably need to.
He's going to put the Bo Jackson on there. Hey, no, I can't argue with Bo. That's
get one of Sam Pittman.
Yeah,
everybody loves Sam. That's never going to be an unpopular tattoo.
Bobby Petrino with the neck brace tattoo.
Okay, I don't think Bobby Petrino's got the universal love that Sam Pittman does. But hey, you know what, Sam Pittman? I don't feel like you can go wrong with a Sam Pittman tattoo. Just don't put it in the same spot.
Nobody would know who it was outside of us,
which is all you need.
Like the people that don't know football, they're like, "What is that?" I'll tell you what about Nick Saban's amazing is that Nick Saban's so famous that he's famous beyond football. And like, there's still people that don't know Kalen DeBoer. They don't know Hugh Freeze. They don't, they just don't know. They're not college football fans, but Nick Saban, they're like, oh yeah, it's the guy from the Aflac commercials. Isn't that the Verbo guy that doesn't want people in his house? How about if you're famous for being grumpy?
Don't put him on the same playing field as Deion Sanders. That's not fair.
I like Deion. I like Coach Prime. They had an impressive win this week.
Pulled it out. I mean, really, I don't think they should have been in that position against Baylor, even though Baylor's good defensively. But lucky for Colorado, and lucky for anybody that took Colorado to win a little money. Quite an ending as far as not only getting the Hail Mary to send it to overtime, and then also stopping the overtime. Right there on the goal line, forcing the fumble, getting out of there with a win. Sometimes you got to win ugly like that, and good for Colorado. Man, we're spending a lot of time talking about Colorado and Auburn, though. I don't know how I like this.
It's football, man. It's Alabama was off right now. Once we see these press conferences, we'll have an idea of what we're going to talk about with Alabama. But comment section, James, Roll Tide, Jersey Dolphins. You're one of my favorite, man. Thank you, Jersey Dolphins. Clint, I mean, he's been with us since the Bama Insider days, so good to see him always. Roll Tide to you. Norman has a question. What are the biggest matchups to watch for? Clint, this is right up your alley while we're waiting on the press conference to start up, and it is about to start, guys.
We'll get to it.
I'm going to, you can answer that question, but as soon as you see Coach Sheridan probably will start it, maybe Coach Wommack come to the stage, just jump off.
Yeah. I mean, for me going in, Jalen Milroe certainly going to be a big guy to watch. I think he needs like a Hendon Hooker 2022 Tennessee type of game. And what I mean by that is Alabama has to be able to run the football, and they have to be able to do it in a variety of ways. You've got to force Georgia. They're probably going to want to run that split safety stuff. If you can run the football effectively, get them to bring more guys into the box, then you're going to open up some opportunities downfield. And I think that's where Jalen Monroe can thrive. Here's we got Wommack up first.
All right, Wommack up.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I think I thought we, as a coaching staff and as players, we navigated our bye week really well. As I said last week, a bye week can be self-serving in a number of different ways for what your program needs, what your individual players need, some things that we look at schematically on defense. You want to be able to self-scout what you're giving away, what you're doing well, what you need to get corrected moving forward. And I thought we had a really productive week in that regard. Some younger players that took steps in the right direction. We were able to focus and pinpoint on some things fundamentally that we've got to continue to work on and execute at a higher level. And so that certainly was a good week and got a whole lot done from that perspective. Looking at Georgia, this is obviously a team that has had tremendous success over the last few years. You look at their program, Coach Smart and his staff are going into their 9th season together. We're in our 1st season together. You think about, all the things that they have built within that program, and they've really done a great job in terms of building a culture, recruiting base, developing great players within their program, and it's showed up on the field. And so we'll certainly have our work cut out for us from that standpoint. I think offensively, Mike Bobo has had a really tremendous career, has done a great job wherever he has been. I think he has been very efficient with his offense here, the last couple of years. I think he's done a really good job. He's aggressive, takes shots at different parts, keeps you guessing, keeps you off kilter, and then certainly is committed to being able to run the football as well. I think their quarterback, Carson Beck, is as good as it comes in college football right now. Incredibly efficient with his decision making, does not take many sacks, rarely turns the ball over, takes care of the football. And I think he does a really tremendous job in his intermediate throwing game, and has great accuracy in those things. Really quick release, great decision maker. Just so impressed by him the more I watch. And I've probably watched, I don't know, every game in the last couple of years here. So I think their running backs, they've got a number of guys that are very physical runners, very detailed in their footwork. They're patient. They set blocks up, and certainly can create explosive plays in their run game at any given moment. I think they're committed to running the football, and you've got to do a great job of being consistent in the fundamentals and schematically knocking out the run down in and down out. Obviously, as an offensive line, they're big, they're physical. They've been around for a bit, and then you've got some pretty impressive offensive skill on the outside as well. So it'll be a great matchup. We'll have our work cut out for us schematically and logistically and all that, but I think everybody's got their work cut out for them. I'm not sure Greg Byrne and our administration may have their work cut out for them more than anybody this week. So everybody's got a tough job in this building. It's time to get to work and show up on Saturday.
Thank you, Coach. Start front right with Mick.
Yes, I mean, any game it's important to generate pressure, but how key is it just with all the weapons and things they have offensively and with what Carson Beck can do for you guys to get after him and create pressure?
Well, I think as an offense, they do a really good job of minimizing the risk for their quarterback. I mean, they get the ball out of their hand, they try to establish the run, they get the ball on the perimeter early. They will take shots, and they'll take shots early in the game, but you've got to find that fine balance of playing good sound coverage and also not making the quarterback feel like he can just sit in the pocket and pick you apart. Long developing plays in the passing game, right? I think they do a really good job if he has time, right, and hitting most of those things, because he's incredibly accurate at different portions in the field, the short game, the intermediate game, and then certainly he can make the long throws downfield. I think this guy's a complete quarterback. I mean, he's really as good as I've seen the last couple of years here. So I think for us, we certainly have to be mindful of making him uncomfortable, but you want to make sure that you are not sacrificing things in from a coverage perspective in order to get that done.
Stay on the right side of Charlie.
Yeah, Coach, you talked about how you've known Christian Robinson for a long time. Just what makes him a good coach at such a young age?
Yeah, see, Rob, we were fortunate enough to both coach under my dad. I thought, my dad always did a really great job of developing young coaches underneath him. He treated us all like position coaches. During his time at Ole Miss, I mean, he had myself, Christian, who's had a really tremendous career since he's left Ole Miss, and then DeMarcus Covington is the defensive coordinator for the New England Patriots, and then you've got Trey Scott, who's the D-line coach at Georgia. So those were the 4 GAs that my dad had over those couple of years there, and really, I think Christian earned enough respect out of from my dad and the rest of the defensive staff to his second year get to coach the inside linebackers and really spend a lot of time with those guys on the field and in the meeting room. And I think that's a credit to who he is, the character that he has, the work ethic, and he's also a very smart ball coach that's got a bright future.
Go left side to Chase.
When you looked at the Georgia Kentucky video, what were some of the things Kentucky did well to hold Georgia to 13 points?
Well, I thought Kentucky played really hard. They played at a fever pitch. They were physical. They played with great effort and finish. I think they've got some guys up front that do a really good job in the run game from a D-line standpoint. And I thought they played the game defensively the way it's supposed to be played. They were attacking on defense. They didn't do too much. I think that's something you got to be mindful of against these guys. They give you a lot of window dressing and eye candy, whatever you want to call it. A lot of formations, a lot of shifts, a lot of pictures, and you've got to be able to fundamentally line up and execute, and yet at the same time do enough to be able to create negative plays and takeaways. And so there's a fine balance there, but I thought Kentucky did a really nice job of that.
Back left side, Steven.
Coach, you mentioned players taking steps forward in the bye week. How did Yonsei Pierre take a step forward?
Yeah, I thought Yonsei continues to have an urgency when he comes out to practice to better himself and thus this football team. It's really rewarding and fun as a coach to see a young man mature right in front of you. And I think he is taking steps from a fundamental standpoint, understanding what we do within our scheme to maximize his opportunities when he's getting out on the field, and he's just becoming a more consistent football player across the board.
Going back and right over to Ryan.
Which not a lot of teams have had success with Georgia over the past few years, but this Alabama team has last year as most recent. Do you rely on those guys, Malachi, Deontay, maybe even Coach Saban, what you've picked his brain on him? What's the secret against Georgia?
Well, I think certainly the experience of our players being in big moments. They've played in the SEC. They've had success in the SEC. They've had success against Georgia. Certainly you want to rely on the experience of those players. There's a lot of young players on our defense that don't have those experiences, right? And we talk about experience being finite, but also as best you can, you want these younger players to be able to draw upon the experience and confidence that comes from, guys like Malachi and Deontay and a number of our defensive line, right, that is, played in SEC matchups and particularly against Georgia. And so those are things that we're going to rely on, and hopefully our experience shows up in the right way Saturday night.
Go to Colin on the front side, left front side.
Hey, Kane, obviously this is a defense you've said that, they want to have a reputation of takeaways, swarm defense. This is a Georgia offense that doesn't really, have a lot of opportunities for takeaways. And I'm curious, for a defense that kind of takes momentum through takeaways and those opportunities, how do you encourage your guys to kind of force those opportunities for an offense that really doesn't give them all that much?
I don't think the focus changes for us in terms of we having an opportunity and a mindset to create takeaway opportunities. We created 13 last week against Wisconsin. We got the ball twice, but we had other opportunities to get the ball, whether it was a sack, cause fumble, a pass breakup, tip balls or pick balls. We say those things, right, in terms of being able to get our hands on the football. And that's certainly not going to be any different against these guys. It will be a challenge, right? It's, one of those, what do they call it? A unstoppable force against an immovable object, right? We're trying to create a lot of takeaways. It's who we are. It's what our identity is. And they do a really good job of taking care of the football. And we've got to do our best to be able to be +1 in the turnover margin on Saturday night. I think that's going to be a huge piece of the game, is who can take care of the football and who can take the football away. I think it'll be a huge indicator in the outcome of the game.
You mentioned Georgia's running backs. It's pretty much a new look room compared to last year. What have you observed from how they're using them in the run in the past compared to last year, or maybe the year before?
I think schematically, I don't see a lot of difference. There's some nuances. There's some little things that you see from an offense, things that they worked in the offseason, things that they liked, things that they wanted to add a little bit, but those are more tweaks. I think this is a very well-established offensive system. I think they believe in what they do, and they have had success in what they do. But these backs are really hungry. I mean, they run really hard. They're physical. They can create yards after contact. And then when they get in space, you've got a couple of guys that can really take advantage of explosive plays in the run game. And so, we'll have our work cut out for us, because I think, it's not just one guy, it's a number of guys that can create explosive things for them in the run game.
You guys are allowing almost a full yard less than anyone else per attempt through the air. Just, is that something that you kind of foresaw at the beginning of the season? Is this passing defense a little bit ahead of schedule? And then just what has allowed you to kind of be able to have that success?
Well, I think, I think when you look at what we want to try to do, the game nowadays, an extension of the run game is teams being able to take easy access throws on the perimeter. And at times we want to be mindful of denying those easy access throws and forcing people to throw into tight windows and tight coverage. And I think there's a number of ways to do that. That doesn't just always mean man coverage. It means anticipating things in zone coverage and vision coverage. And we're doing a fairly good job right now of challenging routes, challenging receivers, not giving lateral space away, but also defending the vertical space. We've got to get better at those things, but I think we've taken steps in the right direction to be able to limit some of those easy access windows in the throw game right now.
We got 2 questions left. Let's go all the way back to the room.
Hey, Kane. Obviously, 2 versus 4 going to be a playoff atmosphere in the middle of the regular season. I mean, how much is a game like this part of the reason that you take this leap from South Alabama to taking the defensive coordinator job here at Alabama?
Yeah, I think, I've said this before, but you come to Alabama to compete against the best and to create value, right, for yourself as an individual, as a player, and value for this team. By executing when it matters most, right? I tell our players this all the time. The greatest players always step up in the biggest moments, and whether that be in a critical third down, or critical SEC matchups, or red zone, or taking the ball off of people, whatever it is, right? These are the opportunities that are given for players to be able to step up in the biggest moments. And as coaches, we're no different. We want to be able to compete against the best. There's things we do schematically, fundamentally, culturally, right, that you want to be able to get a group of young men to all pull the rope in the same direction, and then show up on game day and see what that looks like on Saturdays. And so we're working our tails off right now to maximize our opportunity for success on Saturday as a coaching staff and as a group of players, and then let the chips fall where they may in a couple of days here.
So our last question real quick, Joe.
Coach, you talk about miscues in the run game so far. When you assess the misfits over the last 3 weeks, would you assess them to mental errors, through physical deficiencies, lack of experience in the system, or maybe something else?
Yeah, I think you can't point to any one specific thing. There's a number of things as you're building a new defense and guys getting comfortable, particularly in the run fit. From stopping the run, we're talking about a game of inches, right? Hand placements, techniques, alignments, and then making sure that you have proper leverages across the board. And so there's little details that fundamentally we need to improve on to get ourselves better. Certainly from a schematic standpoint, I think some of the pressures that we're running, we have not been as efficient or effective enough to be able to knock out the run. Those are bullets that sometimes I'm going to use in the run game. And when I use those bullets, we need to be able to efficiently execute those things. And we have not done it to the level that I think we're capable of. Some of that is the growing pains in a new defense, but certainly we need to have an urgency to take steps forward across the board. And I think that we've maximized the bye week in doing that. But those things got to show up as we navigate into SEC play. Okay. Thanks, guys. Roll Tide.
All right, Clint, as we wait for Coach Sheridan to come back up, anything quickly that you noticed with Coach Wommack?
A lot of respect for Carson Beck. And, there's some things that we'll get into after. I don't want to dive into it right now, but just, this is a guy that's seen a lot of football. He's been productive, and he's a tough quarterback to kind of scheme against. There's some things that Alabama will be able to do, but, it's going to take kind of an all hands on deck in order to kind of slow him down. The weapons in the passing game that he currently has, I don't think there's enough established guys. Now, this is the type of game where someone could emerge and become one of those players for him. And maybe Alabama ends up underestimating some of those players. And that's why you got to be careful. But obviously, Wommack has a ton of respect for Carson Beck.
Guys, I want to remind you, if you're hanging out with us here on covercrimson.com, like and subscribe. Be part of our channel. Hit the bell so you know when we drop new content. We got Elephant in the Room with Jake Coker coming up tonight. We got the All-American Report with Mike Johnson later this week. Clint, you've got a bunch of stuff going on as well. So we appreciate all of you guys for hanging out. And we're brought to you by mybookie.ag. Use the promo code NEXTROUND to double your initial deposit. We do this on Mondays. We just sit here, watch the press conference, kind of break it down. This is definitely a different style than what we had with Nick Saban, where he would just come out 8 minutes. If you asked him too tough of a question, he stared at you and got mad and then kind of chuckled about it. These guys love getting up there and talking. I kind of miss the Nick Saban press conferences a little bit, but this has been really fun too.
It has been fun. Yeah, it's a different feel. It's a different look, which, you would fully expect. And we've seen it one way for almost 2 decades. So, I mean, it's not like this was, you get used to it for, 2, 3, 4 years. It was done a certain way for a very, very long time. And now you got Kalen DeBoer, who's offering up, coordinators, and they're giving good answers. Like, you can ask them a question, you can get something that you can use. Here's Nick Sheridan.
So raise your hand and we'll get a mic over to you. Let's start with back room on the right with Ryan.
Hey, Coach. Obviously, every week when you're growing a team and growing a bunch of players, development's huge. But what did this bye week do to Ryan Williams, a freshman who's having a great season so far, but trying to build even more?
Well, I think for all the players, it's just focusing on improvement. And Ryan was no different. I think each player, each position group had things that their coaches and our staff, identified to improve and work on. And so that was really, a key emphasis for not just Ryan, but everybody on offense.
Jump to the left side, Colin.
Obviously, this is not Jalen Milroe's first foray into SEC play. But I'm curious about, do you sense like a weight in terms of his approach this week? How is he kind of, taking on with, 2 versus 4 and kind of the pressure of, the stage that he's about to be on here on Saturday night?
I haven't felt that. Certainly there's an importance on every game that we play. And, the focus is on us and our preparation and, our week of prep, just leading into the game and focusing on that and being where your feet are and staying present. And certainly, I think for every player, when you have experience of competition at this level, I think that helps you. You can lean back on those experiences, on things you learned about yourself and learned about your week of preparation. And but I think what's really important is that no matter who you're playing, that you focus each week on just being your best. And you don't want one game to, your week of preparation and your process to be different based on who the opponent is, or what game of the year it is. And so that's really what the message is to the players is, focus on being your very best each day of preparation, and so that when you get to Saturday, you feel prepared, so that you can go put your best foot forward and compete at a high level.
Yeah, simple question. What do you think of Georgia's defense?
I think they're excellent. I think when you look at them, I think there's lots of things that stand out, but I think first and foremost they have quality players. I think at all three levels, long, fast, explosive players, and then on top of that, I think the coaching staff there does a fantastic job. They're excellent coaches. They have a great system in place. They have years together running that system, and so it's a great challenge. And yeah, they're excellent.
Is sticking with that, they're number one in the country in pass defense. Just when you're watching film of them, what stands out from their secondary?
Well, I think anytime you talk about pass defense, I think it's a combination of the rush and coverage matching together and complementing one another. And so certainly, they do a nice job in that area. They play tight coverage. They mix up their defenses, and then they can rush and create pressure on the quarterback. And so I think both ends of their defense, the back end and the front end, do a good job at complementing one another and, making that a challenge.
Coach, we've talked a lot about sustaining long drives this season. Now against Georgia, without giving away too much of the game plan, what does it look like to do it against them?
Well, I think it's just about execution. It's about us executing simple things well and being able to respond to whatever happens in the game. And so I don't think that that's different this week than it is in the past. Obviously, the opponent is excellent, and so the attention to detail and the focus gets heightened. But it's still about executing and doing the simple things really well. And that's what will show up on Saturday. And for both sides, is the team that executes the best will win the game. And that's what will ultimately decide who wins and loses.
Back left, Steven.
Coach, you mentioned Kendrick Law, just exceptional blocking last week. But what have you seen Kobe Prentice throughout the bye week, get into this week, his progression?
Yeah, I think Kobe's had great focus and he's been very intentional about taking advantage of the reps in practice and continuing to improve. I think Kobe's someone that's explosive with the ball, and he's had those moments throughout his career. And his attitude's been great, and he's been practicing really hard.
Left side, Chase.
Malachi Starks, of course, one of the best safeties in the game. Could you comment on what he brings to Georgia's defense, but also just generally position-wise? Is it harder to account for a free safety in the game plan as opposed to maybe a pass rusher who you could game plan double teams for, et cetera?
Well, I think the thing that stands out is his versatility as a player. He can play close to the line of scrimmage, and he can play in the deep middle part of the field. He can cover man-to-man. I think he's an excellent football player that obviously has experience in their system. They can put him in different spots and different personnel groupings, and he's excellent in all areas. And so, as far as accounting for those players, I think that's always your challenge each and every week as you game plan, is how to put your players in the best position and create the best advantages you possibly can based on who you're going against. And certainly, he's an excellent player that has had great production and very versatile, can play lots of different spots, lots of different techniques. He's a great player.
Two-part question. When you look over the first 3 weeks, what are your impressions of your team's early down offense and what's contributed to success on third down?
I think, there's some inconsistencies on first and second down, from an efficiency standpoint, that we'd like to be better. We'd like to be cleaner. I think that goes back to some of the other questions, that, have been asked as far as just the execution, the down in and down out execution. And so that's something that will be important for us moving forward. And certainly in this game, I think the third down the key there has been trying to stay away from some longer yardage situations. I think we've been in some manageable third downs, which, the advantage starts to tilt towards the offense in those situations when you're not so predictable. So I think the guys have done a nice job, and obviously that challenge will be heightened on Saturday.
Go to the left side, Tony.
This is a team, I think it's only allowed one play of 20 yards through the air. Is that something that you kind of consider when you're game planning, or do you just kind of go with what you do and hope that you execute to the fullest?
Well, the explosive play cut up is not long. Yeah, so that didn't take a very long time to watch. I think what you're looking at is structure. You're looking at personnel, and you're trying to match, things that you do to the challenges that they present. I think that's what you're doing each and every week. And so, certainly they've done a great job of that to this point. And, it'll be important for us to execute at a high level on Saturday.
Our last question will go to Travion back left.
Coach Cap mentioned that the offensive line kind of took like a deep dive over the bye week and just review tape from the first 3 games. Can you just talk about that group as a whole, the continuity they've built, and being able to get some guys back and just getting that group together back as a whole, having that bye week off, coming into conference play? Can you just talk about that?
Yeah, I think they've made strides for sure, in the first 3 weeks. You mentioned the continuity. We have not played consecutive games with the same starting 5, and so there's been rotation there, and we'll continue to play the players that deserve the opportunity to do that, but I certainly saw progress. I certainly think that this past game there was progress made, but we need that to continue, and not just for the offensive line, but for the other positions as well. For each person, each position group to just, continue to improve and hone in on your fundamentals, your techniques, your communication, all the different things that make, units and position groups successful. And it is certainly, when you're an offensive lineman, you have 5 guys that need to, play as one. And so I've seen improvement there. There's great urgency. There's great focus. Coach Cap's done a real nice job of developing that group, and they're gelling, and getting, better and better each day. And so we expect that to continue. And yeah, we're pleased with the group's effort and work ethic at practice.
All right,
Okay, roll Tide.
All right, there you go. 2 coordinators down, Clint Lamb and Mick Gillispie here on Cover Crimson as we wait for Coach DeBoer. Thank you guys for hanging out with us here. Like and subscribe, thumbs up. Get in the comments section, ask some questions. We're going to be on after the press conference to chew on everything that they've talked about. But Clint, I'll tell you, what sticks out to me the most is his comment about, hey, we didn't have the same 5 guys on the line until last game, and now that we got them again this week. So we know they're healthy, and we know that the offensive line is going to be ready against this really tough Georgia defense.
Yeah, which is something that Georgia can't say right now after losing Tate Ratledge. Whoever they end up starting at right guard, Micah Morris is probably going to be that guy. He's played a lot of football, but just getting the same 5 guys out there and letting them play and letting them gel. Alabama's had, an issue with that up to this point, but, not only do you get that in consecutive games here, assuming no one else gets hurt pregame, which I guess at this point we can't just, or this week in practice, you can't just assume, but I guess as long as they make it to this weekend fully healthy, you get consecutive games of these players. They've now had a couple of weeks to practice. I think that's important for Georgia on their side because you lose Tate Ratledge, but they've had some time now to adjust to that. So I think you'll get a better performance from them than you did against Kentucky. But, for Alabama, that's really, really important too, because we saw the difference that having those types of pieces available to you, what it can do for your offense. Georgia's defense is a completely different beast than Wisconsin, but it was certainly encouraging to see that performance. And I'm hoping a couple of more weeks you continue to see that, and they can continue to win more on early downs like they did against Wisconsin, keep the playbook open. I think that'll be critical.
All right, here's Coach DeBoer.
You bet. Yeah. All right. Good morning. Just getting into our SEC opener, so it's exciting for us and our program, and obviously with Georgia coming in here, ton of respect for Coach Smart and everything he's accomplished in his career, and obviously they're at Georgia with all the success they've had, and so good to be playing at home. We need our crowd, our fans, to bring the energy, and obviously we got to do our part to make it exciting and make sure that there's things to cheer for. So looking forward to a great atmosphere and an awesome weekend for our program. So bye week, you get a chance to get some guys healthy, and so that was good. Even maybe not guys that are you're noticing maybe being out. It's just guys that got dings and going through practice and just doing everything they can and end up on the field on Saturdays. So it was good from that aspect to get a few days for getting healthier there. So, but yeah, looking forward to a great week of practice. Shouldn't be any problem. It hasn't been a problem of trying to have energy from our guys, and that certainly shouldn't be the case this week. I know that. So, questions?
Thanks, Coach. Start with Nick on the right.
Yeah, with former President Trump set to be at this game or planning to be at this game, what are your thoughts on that and just the impact or what it speaks to about the impact of this game?
Yeah, I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of celebrity type people here, people that want to come be a part of what's happening on game day. It's going to be everyone's watching, and so be great to have everyone who wants to come watch be here. And for us, I told the guys this with game day and everything coming here as well. For the guys to try to take as much off of their plate, other than maybe a few extra interviews towards the end of the week. Just the main thing is that they get prepared to play the best football game that they've played this year. Or I always challenge them to play the best football game they've ever played in their career. And so that's what matters when it comes down to what we can control. And but yeah, it is kind of cool that we have a lot of people who want to come be a part of the atmosphere and add to the excitement and energy that the game will bring.
Go to Colin on the left side.
Hey, Kalen. Obviously, this is your first kind of experience with SEC play. And I mean, having, coached against SEC teams, whether it be at Eastern Michigan, Indiana, what were your perceptions of those teams? What made those SEC teams different and kind of, is it kind of going into like what you expect? I mean, Georgia's kind of an outlier, but like, I mean, is it kind of going to what to expect in terms of your personal coaching approach of SEC play?
Yeah, I think you're asking, before I came here, right? Kind of what the perception was. I think, you always just felt like physicality, right? Speed. And I think as much as anything, you sometimes had a player here or a player there that can line up and compete against that person across from them. But the problem is, especially with special teams, the magnitude and depth of a roster in the SEC. And, when one guy comes out, another guy comes in and he's almost just as good, if, not as good. And so what that does is that gives the guy that went off the field a chance to get a breather and come out and be fresh. And so, that's to me a big part of what makes the SEC, what it is. You got your top tier, top round draft picks that are out there making plays for you. The physicality, the speed, game breakers on both sides of the ball at all times. And then you have the depth of that being much deeper than what most programs are able to have. Pretty much all programs are able to have.
We'll go back to the right side to Charlie.
Yeah, hey coach, when you watch film of this Georgia defense, what's the first thing that kind of jumps off the screen to you?
Well, I think you're always going to, again, kind of almost the same line with same answer I just gave is you're going to have a lot of physicality. You're going to have speed, but you got a system that's in place where guys are understanding, and trusting who's going to be where. And so, what you got to try to do is create the opportunities with your matchups, create opportunities and try to do what you can do to get a step or maybe, have that defense freeze or flinch. That's offensive football. You try to do that any week, but that's what becomes a bigger test when you have a program like this that has so much continuity in what they've been doing, because of their system and especially on the defensive side of the ball.
A couple questions from the back middle. Ryan, go ahead.
Coach, not a lot of people have had success against Georgia in the past. One team that has is Alabama. What have you used kind of having Jalen on your side and Malachi and some of the players that have played against this kind of team before to your advantage going into this week?
Well, you look back to last year, right? And this is a new team. This is a new season. And that's what I always make sure we're emphasizing this is the 2024 Alabama Crimson Tide football team, but there's certainly learning moments that you have when you've been through the experiences, and that's not obviously me. That's our players, as you mentioned, that can take those experiences and give them confidence, give them an understanding of what it takes. And you try to give them the platform. You try to give them a chance to be able to spread what they've learned to the rest of the team, and understanding it's going to be a 4-quarter game. Understand that there's going to be ebbs and flows of the game, that it's going to be, the physicality isn't just going to be here and there. It's every single play. So you got to be on your game, on your A game, the entire start to finish, and do it as long as it's needed, considering no matter how long the game goes. So that you take those guys with those experiences, and you make sure that they get a chance to spread what they've learned with the rest of the football team.
Jamie?
Hey, Coach, everything's a first for you here. Just how are you feeling heading into coaching such a huge game like Alabama and Georgia?
Yeah, every game, like you said, is a first. First road trip, first game in Bryant Denny, first conference game. But I think what you really just try to do is you just simplify it down. Any big game, and the next one is always the biggest one, right? You win this one, the next one becomes the bigger one, and so forth. And so, for us, it's just really honing in and trying to simplify it down to what you really have control of. And it's making sure our energy, attitude, and effort is on point, that we're going to continue to fight, in the midst of the battle that's going to happen on Saturday, but that our preparation is, 100% where it needs to be, because that's what's going to give you the confidence. That's what's going to give you the belief and trust when it comes to those big moments that are going to present themselves on Saturday.
Chase on the left side.
You mentioned at the top guys healing up during the off week. Can you be specific at all about how things look for Quay Rousseau and Malachi Moore?
Yeah, I would expect Malachi. That was just a matter of time. Working through his situation. He's out there practicing already at the end of last week, and with Quay, still taking the steps, still working through his situation, and I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic with Quay. We'll just have to see as we evaluate throughout the week what that looks like for him.
Go to Kennington on the right side.
Along those same lines, what's the status of Cole Adams and Richard Young?
Yep. Cole practiced, here, not 100% of practice, but he's out there competing and doing some things with the activities that we have, even some competitive drills. And so we're just working him back slowly, and then Richard is the same case. So he's been out there, been in uniform and going through the drills, and working back slowly with the bye week. You never want to not push, but we also had to make sure we're doing this smart with these guys and not setting themselves up for any setbacks. And so both those guys are kind of in the same boat too.
So Steven back left.
Coach, over the bye week, how did you see a young player like Yancey Pierre take steps forward for this week against Georgia?
Yeah, he's got a taste of it, and so once that happens, there's an excitement that happens, and it's fun seeing, a guy like that, realize that every day matters, that his growth is just exponentially going to happen, especially at his age. And so, him taking, those practices seriously is what you love to see, so that he can prove to himself, prove to his teammates, prove to his coaches, all of us, that, he's headed in the right direction, and, wanting to be prepared for getting on the football field more and more each and every week.
Go to Emily Grace in the front right here.
Coach, in terms of time of possession, your team and Georgia are almost identical. How do you gain separation in that area, and how significant is that point of emphasis on Saturday?
Yeah, time of possession is always an interesting stat, right? Just because, we saw in one game at the beginning of the season, our time of possession was not in our favor drastically. explosive plays and things like that. And I feel scoring points is what it's all about. And in order to score points, you do have to have explosive plays. There's just statistical analysis that shows that. But there is a piece to also not being on the having one side of the ball on the football field, especially your defense, and how that will wear you down, and especially in a game like this when you know it's going to be physical. You want to have that opportunity to play team football. You want to make sure that that exists so that one side of the ball, especially your defense, isn't out there becoming vulnerable as the game goes on. We take a lot of pride in being a second half team, being a fourth quarter team, whether that's our, understanding and learning of what we've seen in the first half and applying it, or especially with the fourth quarter and the physical training that comes along with being prepared and being able to be great when those moments and big times come.
This is the first time since 2007 that Alabama's been not favored at home. What's your approach to maybe built-in bulletin board material? Is it something that you embrace, or is it something you try to get the players to block out? How do you kind of go about that?
I mean, that's no one's fault that that's the case, but obviously there's going to be, even if there's one doubter, right? It falls along with the Lank mentality, and that's what we get to do is let any of the naysayers, know what we're capable of, and that's no one's fault. That's what it is. That's a tribute to what people see in Georgia and how high level of a football team that they have, and to their credit, that's exactly what they are. And then for us, it's just a matter of doing what we can do, and making sure that we present the best version of what we can be on Saturday, again, through great preparation, great focus, making sure that we're feeling great about what we have, because we do. We feel like we have a football team that is a top tier team that just every day is going to continue to get better. And that's not just this week, that's not just next week, that's all season long. And so we really feel the sky's the limit. You have to catch some breaks here along the way, whether that's health or those big moments in games that get the swing in your favor. And so you create those breaks, and that's again where us just going to work, focusing on the main thing, focusing on ourselves, focusing on us. That's what matters most.
Questions from the way back, far left. Let's go. Yeah. Go ahead. Yep. And then we'll give Jonathan.
All right, sounds good. Kalen, you mentioned the big atmosphere, 2 against 4, playoff-like atmosphere, really in the middle of the regular season. I mean, how much is a game like this, an environment like this, part of the reason you decide to take that leap and go all the way across the country to coach at a place like Alabama?
Yeah, no question. And I told our guys that, yesterday when we met, kind of, even though there was some work done the end of last week, schematically, offense, defense, when we got together as a team, we just talked about the game and really having some perspective. And you're exactly right. You come to this place here at Alabama to be a part of games that, gather a lot of attention, to be in an atmosphere and environment that's just special and different. And so embrace it, embrace the challenges, embrace the things that are going to come our way against great football teams. And that's what you got to love about being a competitor. And so yes, you're exactly right. We came here, to all of us, different journeys, players, staff, came here in different ways to be a part of something like this that you're going to see here this week and on Saturday.
Coach, over the past few years, Georgia has had a lot of success in these big regular season games when there's a lot of hype. Why do you think that is? And then 2, how do you guys try and match that as a program?
Yeah, there's got to be a belief and trust. And when it comes to close games, you can see finding a way, comes down to, wanting it, preparing, because you do want it, preparing in a special way. And they've just got great continuity, and the physicality you see, the scheme, the schemes, schematics, especially defense that goes way back. I mean, Coach Smart, has implemented his system and has a lot of people now around him that have carried that on over the years as well. Offensively, now you see some carry over the last couple of years with consistency there. And so with that comes confidence. With that comes belief. And for us, that's what we're establishing too. That's what we're working on daily, is to just really be efficient in putting that into our program, creating that. It happens because of the success our guys have had together. But I think now, you're just trying to offensively, defensively, special teams wise, just trying to keep it simple so they can go out there and play fast, but also make it complex enough to where it's tough to defend.
All right, we'll finish up with Katie on the left side of here.
You've already talked about this a little bit, but this is the first time in more than a decade that Alabama's first SEC game is against a top 10 team. Kind of how do you feel about being welcomed to the SEC like that, with that being your first game? But also kind of how can you learn a lot about your team by jumping into SEC play against such a high quality opponent?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I actually didn't know that, but yeah, it's welcome to the SEC, right? But that's it's going to happen throughout the season, right? There's going to be a lot of great teams that we're going to face, and so just being at your best, that's what's required of me. That's required of all of us, and that's comes down to just going to work, rolling up your sleeves, and enjoying all that comes with these big challenges that are in front of you each and every week.
Thank you, Coach.
Awesome. Thank you, Roll Tide.
All right, there you have it. Coach DeBoer and his press conference. So got some news right off the bat on injuries. And Clint, I'll let you kind of jump in on that, and then we'll kind of get into some other stuff. But guys, thanks for hanging out with us. We're going to talk Alabama football here on Cover Crimson. Thumbs up, hit the bell, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Thank you for being here and hanging out with us. But I guess we'll start with the injury report. Doesn't seem like Alabama has that many significant injuries.
Yeah, that's the way that it came off to me. I mean, even Richard Young, who we were kind of unsure about. He mentioned that Cole Adams had practiced, but he hadn't been 100%. They're kind of working him back slowly. He said the same thing for Richard. He said, that he had been out there, he was going through drills, going to have to be a wait and see. But that obviously, or at least it tells me it's not really like a long-term thing. But then you got Rusall. It's kind of the same situation. He's still taking steps according to Kalen DeBoer, Malachi Moore. That was just a situation where it was a concussion. It was going to take time to get through the protocol. He started practicing last week. So, I mean, it's possible that 3 of these 4 guys are not available for Alabama this Saturday, but it's also possible that, all 4, if you include Malachi Moore, are available, and that would be absolutely huge. I think probably out of the 4 guys, I mean, obviously Cole Adams from a punt return perspective, that's really important to get him back. I thought he was doing pretty well with that. Malachi is like the heart and soul of your defense, but it looks like he's going to be a go. Quay Rusall is the one I'm most interested in. Doesn't mean that Richard Young's not important, and he, I think, would absolutely play a role on Saturday, but just with Rusall and just what he provides as far as being a complete wolf, can, convert speed to power as a pass rusher, can set the edge extremely well. I think it's going to be really important to have a guy who can do a little bit of both against this Georgia style of offense. It's going to try to attack you in some different ways, catch you off balance, use play action, take, the occasional vertical shot. But yeah, I mean, Rusall is going to play a big part if he's available. If not, then Alabama's got to piece together some other guys that can still make it work and still be effective at that wolf position. But it just becomes all the more difficult, and you can't afford to lose anybody else at that point.
Brian wants to know about Jaheim Otis. Is he hurt? I haven't heard anything on Jaheim Otis being hurt.
I mean, I don't know of anything necessarily. Doesn't mean, Kalen DeBoer was, talking about guys that maybe we didn't even know about that were kind of a little bit banged up, and the bye week helps them. That could be a lot of different players. Maybe Otis is one of those guys. What I can tell you is that I don't think that he's been playing his best football. Now, I'm hoping that comes around. Maybe it's the fact that he's kind of adjusting to being a little bit heavier. The fact that kind of, he was so limited last year. He didn't participate in the spring. Maybe as he knocks some rust off, gets more comfortable in his new size, or getting back to being closer to his new size, maybe he'll, pick up that play a little bit. But I just don't think he's playing his best football right now. So I can see why, the snaps have been kind of limited, and combined with that, I could see why someone would be asking that question. We just don't know anything definitively.
When you look at this Alabama and Georgia matchup, what do you feel like the most significant position on the defense is to be able to stop the Georgia offense?
Ooh, that's a really good question. You could probably go in a number of different directions. You can talk about the importance at corner because of the uncertainty there, the fact that they've allowed some teams to get deep on them. I will say that has not been really a strength of Carson Beck's or Georgia's. Like if you go back and listen to Kane Wommack, and I don't think this was an intentional shot at all, but he talked about him in the intermediate passing game, and that is really where Carson Beck has been really strong. Whether it be last year, whether it be this year. Last year, I thought he worked the middle of the field a little bit more too. You haven't seen as much of that, to this point. I do think he's certainly capable, so I fully expect that to kind of become more of a bigger part of their offense. But just working vertically, it kind of makes you wonder, okay, do they have the ability to exploit it as well as maybe some of these other teams who weren't able to capitalize, but the opportunities were certainly there by guys getting vertical. I don't know about that. I mean, when you lose Brock Bowers, you lose, now I'm drawing a blank on his name, but the
Lad McConkey.
Lad McConkey. You lose those two guys; those were kind of your big play guys. So I'm curious to see who steps up in these types of games. Guys have to step up because the way that you want to win, the opposing team is good enough and they're deep enough at a lot of different positions on either side of the football where they can take away some of those things. And they're going to try to do some things to catch you off balance or off guard. And you've got to be able to adjust. And other guys always end up having to step up. And, I'll be curious to see who steps up in this game for Georgia as far as can they take advantage and get some vertical opportunities. That's something. But, the cornerback position would be one for me in particular because I think Georgia's run game is so important to what they want to do. Last year, it kind of, in some ways, it felt like Georgia got to a point where they were a lot of times you run to set up the pass. It felt like Georgia, at least in some of the games that I watched leading up to the SEC championship, it felt more like they threw to set up the run.
Right.
And they didn't really do that necessarily in the SEC championship, but just that was it was an interesting dynamic because, you did some things as far as getting McConkey and Bowers involved, especially early, to try to open up some opportunities with your run game. And a lot of that's dictated based off of how the defense attacks you. But, now it's more of there's a huge emphasis on the run. I thought DeJuan Walker played a really good game for Kentucky a couple of weeks ago. Interior defensive lineman, big body guy. I think he's a little bit more of like an athletic freak relative to a Tim Keenan, but Keenan having the ability to stop the run and collapse the pocket. I would expect a big game from Keenan, or at least for him to serve a very important role in this game. So he would be the other guy I would probably point to, either one of the corners or, one of those interior defensive linemen. Got to be able to set the edge and stuff too. Got to get play, quality play out of everybody, but those are the two that kind of stand out.
I just feel like when Alabama's beaten Georgia, they've limited the run game. And it's like when I watched them start to beat up on Clemson, they started to run to the outside. They did that in the bowl game against Florida State. Like, you couldn't stop the outside run. And then all of a sudden, once that happened, they just started running all over them. Alabama, and I feel like Caleb Downs was a big part of it, but were able to crash the corners. They never were really able to get outside. And then Bama's always been good inside because they got big bodies and guys that can bring you down there. And then, obviously with McConkey and Bowers not at 100%, they weren't as much of a factor. And it just kind of was like an anaconda, like, closing in on that Georgia offense. It's the Georgia defense, though, that's been the most important part of their team. I mean, that's what Kirby brought to the table. It brought it from Alabama. But the games that they've struggled in, teams have moved the ball on them. It's not just Alabama. Ohio State moved the ball on them. They won the game, but it was close. If you can move the ball in Georgia and score points, you have a chance to beat them. They don't get into a lot of those games, and I felt like that was something that hurt them against Alabama these years, is that they just were able to beat up on everybody. And then when someone was like stood toe to toe with them, they weren't ever in those kind of games and they didn't know how to play them.
I think, that's got some truth to it for sure. And I can definitely see where you would view it that way. When you look at their, like, a lot of their runs off tackle, like it's outside stuff. I think 2/3 of their run game has kind of been to the outside. That's something that Alabama needs to be paying attention to. Like I talk about Tim Keenan and his importance. I think collapse in the pocket is a huge part of this. And you know that Georgia's going to try to also kind of establish more as far as being balanced, whether it be off tackle, outside stuff, or between the tackles. But, you know, when you talk about what you mentioned about Alabama's offense and just attacking Georgia defensively, before we started listening to the press conferences, I brought up the fact that I think Jalen Milroe needs to have a Hendon Hooker type of game. How Alabama attacks you offensively is a little bit different than Josh Heupel. They're not going to be as much as far as spread you out sideline to sideline, make you to defend, you know, end to end. But at the same time, what I liked about Hendon Hooker in that game against Alabama in 2022 is not only did he could take advantage when Alabama tried to cheat up and add more numbers to the box because Jabari Small and Jalen Wright were both having a lot of success with their traditional run game. Hendon Hooker was having a lot of success with his legs. They were attacking Alabama in a number of different ways, really versatile with their run game, and they were having success doing it. That Alabama was they were stuck in conflict between what were they going to allow from a vertical standpoint versus what were they going to put in the box to help with numbers on that front. And that's what Alabama needs to do is they need to be able to run the football effectively enough to force Georgia to bring numbers or more numbers into the box and stop playing the split safety looks. And then once they do that, Jalen Milroe has to be able to take advantage as far as hitting the vertical ball. We know that's a strength of his. Georgia's going to try to do whatever they can to take it away. If they can win against Alabama's run game with limited numbers in the box, I don't think that bodes well for Alabama. So for Milroe, he's got to, not only do they need to be able to run the football well with their running backs, he's got to add that dynamic rushing ability that he's capable of. And then he's got to continue to do, they're going to try to force the short to intermediate stuff on him as much as possible. But if you can have a consistent, effective run game, you can get some of those vertical opportunities. And he's got to be on his game because last year, I don't think he played his best football against Georgia. And I certainly don't think that his deep ball was there at all. They took several shots downfield and just couldn't get anything going on that front. And, you know, I think that that's certainly going to play a big part in this game. He's got to be able to do better on that. Alabama's offense certainly has to do better on that as a whole. And I think that'll be really important.
Yeah. It's crazy that we're here. And the thing about it, as I almost forgot when we were talking about this earlier, that that Georgia is number 2 and that Texas is number 1. And I mean, just kind of a side note, I think whoever wins this game has a really good chance of jumping Texas as the number 1 team in the country.
That's actually really interesting. Yeah, I would say, I know from my power rankings perspective, you know, some Alabama fans weren't happy preseason and currently right now. I had Texas 1, Georgia 2, and Alabama 3. But I said, I mean, you know, Alabama's got a perfect opportunity to go from 3 to 1 really quick. If they beat Georgia, I understand it's at home. I understand that's an advantage. But, you know, if you're Kalen DeBoer and you can prove that you can get the job done on both sides of the football against a team like Georgia, who's kind of was viewed as the, I wouldn't say consensus, but as much consensus as you can possibly get going into the year as far as being the top team, I think that is far and away more impressive than anything that, you know, Texas has done up to this point. They've looked really good against inferior opponents. They did go on the road and they beat Michigan pretty good. But Michigan, you know, Anthony or Orgy or whatever his name is, you know, he wasn't really their starting quarterback at that point. I think what he provides as far as just complementing what they have from a run game perspective, I think that's really important. And so they were a different team against USC than they were against Texas. So, I mean, I think that there is room for Alabama to climb, certainly in my power rankings, but I don't think many people care too much about that. I think there's also something to be said as far as their potential to climb maybe even to that number 1 spot. That would be quite the jump. But, you know, I think it's possible.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, this is where the rubber meets the road. This, to me, feels like the first true battle of superpowers this year. And this is always the game when Alabama and Georgia play. I'm curious to see how it looks without Nick Saban, but I feel like for Alabama, they have a lot to prove. I thought it was interesting, and I talked to Coach DeBoer last week and asked him about the same thing. You know, what's you got President Trump is going to be there, and that's a big deal. Not just, you know, forget about your politics. I mean, the fact that this is a major event. You know, when when people start showing up to watch the game, and there's going to be a lot more celebrities and, and big time politicians are going to be there. But when you have a top-notch program, I've been watching college football forever. It's always been this way, except it used to be USC or Texas, and Alabama's right there now. And it's going to be interesting to see, besides President Trump, who all is going to be there at the game. There's a great advantage of being able to just stay focused and not get caught up in all the hype.
And I think, anytime you ask a coach about anything, even if it's just a name, in the political realm, I feel like he's been a little uncomfortable answering some of those questions just because you don't want to say something, people misconstrue it one way or another. But I think that it is important to bring it up, and not from a political standpoint, but just from the standpoint of, like you said, the magnitude of the game. How often, does a president or a former president show up to watch you play college football? I mean, it's just not something you see very often. The last time, President Trump was in Tuscaloosa, it was for that 2019 LSU game. That was a massive deal against two of the best teams in the country. Ended up, obviously LSU ends up getting that win. They go on and win the national championship. So, I mean, I understand it's a different part of the season. That was much later in the year. But even though this is only week, 5, I think it's extremely possible that whoever wins this game ends up going on to win the national championship or having a really good case to eventually go on and win the national championship. So, it's managing the pressures of having a game this big, with your players, with your coaching staff. Nick Saban always did a pretty good job of that. I think later on in his career, like the anxiety as far as playing on the road, or maybe the anxiety of playing in some of these massive games, there was a lot of pressure on Alabama to continue to be Alabama. But I think, while a lot of people just assume it's the same approach, I think Nick Saban retiring, a lot of those expectations kind of died down a little bit. And, there are a lot of Alabama fans going into this weekend thinking, yeah, I absolutely see a scenario where Georgia wins. And so they're in this, hey, you got to continue to be Alabama and live up to all these, in a lot of cases, unfair expectations week in and week out. That can actually help you in these types of games or these types of situations. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a massive game, and which team manages that pressure better will probably end up winning.
Hanging out with us here on Cover Crimson. We're together every day on the channel. We appreciate you guys for being here as well. And I want to remind you, we're brought to you by mybookie.ag. Use the promo code NEXTROUND to double your initial deposit. He's Clint Lamb, and I'm Mick Gillispie, talking Alabama and Georgia. And we just got through the press conferences. I thought all three guys did a nice job talking. Alabama was, you mentioned it before, very complimentary, a lot of respect for Georgia, talking about their defense. Hey, these guys are so good. Watching those press conferences kind of makes you nervous a little bit, just because as an Alabama guy, like you can feel that they know that this is going to be a really big test for these guys.
Well, I think one of the things when you talk about like Carson Beck and something that Wommack mentioned, and it doesn't get talked about enough, is there has to be a balance between applying pressure on Carson Beck and making sure that you've got sound coverages and you've got everything covered that you possibly can. Sometimes you're going to take some risk and you're going to try to get home. You don't want Carson Beck thinking he's got all day back there and allow him to get comfortable, especially when you're talking about the short to intermediate parts of the field. He can really start carving you up if you do that. So you've got to be able to put him under duress. And when he has been put under duress, I don't think he's always responded great, so I think that's really important in this game. But at the same time, there are going to be some things in Carson Beck from like a pre-snap and post-snap, and as far as going through progressions, be able to make reads, understanding what the defense is doing. This is one of the advantages that I think maybe he has over like a Jalen Milroe, where he can dissect things. And so if you try to take some risk, he understands where he needs to go with the football and how, he can make you pay for it, maybe a little bit more so than Jalen Milroe at this point in his career. And that's something that Alabama's got to account for and really try to avoid as much as possible. That's why, if you can, if they can apply pressure with their front four and they don't really have to add a fifth or even a sixth guy as far as, being able to put him under duress, I think that bodes really well for Alabama. but that's kind of a TBD. I think on the interior of their offensive line, losing to Tate Ratledge, I think that makes them a little bit more vulnerable. You look at the tackle play, Ernest Green, Xavier Trust, and Monroe Freeling. Those three guys against Kentucky combined, that was their three offensive tackles. They combined for allowing 7 pressures. And, with the way Kane Wommack's defense kind of works is, the sacks are great, but really it's just a matter of applying pressure and letting a guy like Keon Savage kind of roaming a little bit, playing that cover one robber or that robber role in a lot of situations, letting him take advantage when the quarterback makes a poor choice. So if it's a matter of just simply putting pressure on Carson Beck, if they can do that, I really like Alabama's chances.
Yeah, you're talking about like some of the offensive stats, right? Bama's offense clearly better than Georgia's offense. I mean, you talk about Bama's scoring offense, Bama scoring 49, Georgia's scoring 31.7, right? So, I mean, you're talking about 6, and Georgia's like in the 50s, like is 58th scoring offense. Rushing offense, which is where Georgia's always been so good, right? Averaging 145 yards a game. Bama's at 238. This is a different look as far as this matchup, just because Bama's offense is, I feel like, a lot better and more explosive than Georgia's so far this year. Although I'm not taking anything away from Georgia. I mean, we know how they can be. Bama's 14th best in third down conversions. Georgia's like in the 70s. So I mean, like Bama's over 50% from third, on third down. Total offense, Bama's over 450 yards total offense a game. It's like 467, right? And Georgia is just barely over 400. So Bama, I mean, it's the Kalen DeBoer factor. And I don't feel like this offense is even quite there yet. I mean, I feel like we're seeing it. But we haven't had the offensive line together for 2 straight games. The first game, I felt like they just scored so fast. We never saw them get in. There's been a lot of 3 and outs. But I just know the focus is going to be there this week because these two teams have so much respect for each other. This isn't a hate. This isn't like Auburn. This isn't a hate thing. This is Alabama recruits the same guys that Georgia recruits. At least they have when it was Saban and Kirby, because Kirby basically just took the formula and went over there and used it. So you're talking about guys that have visited Alabama, that have been around, probably chose between Alabama and Georgia. It almost feels like adversaries in the way that you have a lot of respect for them. You just want to beat them.
It's kind of incredible. Alabama's and Georgia's offenses have kind of been the polar opposite in this sense. Alabama's kind of been more known for being the explosive play offense. They score quick, or, it's boom or bust. A lot of 3 and outs, a lot of, quick scoring drives. And there's been a little bit more of that, against Wisconsin. You saw a little bit more sustainability. So it's not like they're not improving on that front. I think the offensive line was a major part of that early, but for Georgia, it's kind of only been long sustained drives. You haven't seen a ton of explosiveness from their offense. So it's kind of, I don't think you can win with just either one. You can't be, as far from a defensive perspective, you can't be a 3 and out or score quick offense. I mean, eventually your defense is going to wear down, and the opposing offense is going to be able to have their way with them. Move the ball how they want to down the field, and they're going to dictate, the pacing of the game. So that cannot happen. You also need to have a lot of that explosiveness to your offense. You need to be able to take advantage of some opportunities. Alabama at the end of halves, whether it be against Wisconsin, whether it be at the end of the game against USF, they have done a really good job this year as far as working, in that 2-minute offense, moving the football down the field quickly, explosive plays, and scoring quickly. And so Georgia needs to have a little bit of that, because there's too many situations throughout a game where you need some of that. So, I will be curious to see how that ends up playing out, and which one can kind of become more complete in this game, if that's possible, to where if, you can do a little bit more of both, and how much that helps their offense if they're able to.
No one asked the question I would have asked, and I know they wouldn't have answered it anyway, but I feel like T-Rob leaving Alabama's defense, and then the secondary being sucked out with him, I feel like there's a correlation there. Him going to Georgia, I felt like that was Kirby coming after Nick Saban like he always does. His best His best coaching was basically just copying what he learned from the GOAT, which, I mean, who can complain or blame him for that? But, and then Alabama and, you know, trying to get Tavarius Robinson to stay at Alabama. And then he goes to Georgia, but he wanted to call plays, Clint, but then he doesn't get to call plays there, which he wasn't going to get to call plays at Alabama. So basically made a vertical move. And I'm just curious, like, I guess because Saban's gone, we're not really getting into that too much. But to me, that's a side story to this, too. I would love to see Alabama torch him from a competitive standpoint. I know he's a nice guy. I would love to see him, that Alabama torch that defense on principle alone.
It's a tough defense to torch, you know. So if they're able to do that, that's going to speak volumes for this offense. And you know, you look at some of the guys who have had success against Georgia's defense. You know, Bryce Young in the SEC championship a couple of years ago. Tua in the second half against, you know, Georgia in 2018. It's like that's not really the style of quarterback that they have, and so they're going to do what they can. Like I said, and it's tough to do both. It's very tough, but they're going to try to take away the vertical passing game from Alabama, try to play it probably, if I had to guess, as much too high, you know, split safety looks as possible, and then take away Jalen Milroe's legs, put him under pressure consistently, and make him beat you. If they can do that, then it's going to be a massive problem for Alabama. But I just think Alabama's got a lot more that they've been kind of holding back, and that should be able to be enough to, you know, generate some offense for them, which should present some opportunities.
We're going to bring on Emily Grace, who was at the press conference today in Tuscaloosa, and she's still there. Before, though, I want to tell you guys, they've announced the game time for the Vanderbilt game in Nashville. That's at 3:15. I'll be there with Jake Coker doing the tailgate show from Live Oak Bar on Friday, Music Row. Clint, you're invited. Emily Grace, if you're there, you're invited. Everybody hanging out, you're invited. But how you doing in Tuscaloosa right now?
It's a fun atmosphere already. This week is going to be so much fun. I'll be down here again for some player interviews, assistants, all of those type of things. But we got a chance to speak with Kalen DeBoer, Coach Wommack, and Coach Sheridan, as you guys saw. And it was interesting to hear all of their varying perspectives on this game. I think we can all agree that this is a game that everyone knows how good Georgia is. No one is underplaying that. But for the first time, Alabama is coming in as an underdog for the first time since 2007 inside of Bryant-Denny. It's crazy when you think about it.
Yeah, isn't it like 90 games or something? I mean, it's been a long time.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I was 6 years old in 2007.
Please don't ever say that on this show again. Because I worked there then. I was already through college.
I just wanted to see y'all's reaction for that one. It was really good to talk to Coach DeBoer, and he shed some light, obviously, that every game is a first for him, right? It was first game, first away game, now it's first SEC game. And so he's approaching it same as he always does, calm, cool, and collected. I was able to ask him about an interesting stat that I want to share with you guys. Our friends at Sidelines Bama found this. But the time of possession is almost identical when it comes to Georgia and Alabama. So Georgia's averaging 29 minutes and 41 seconds. Alabama's averaging 29 minutes and 10 seconds. So I asked Coach DeBoer about this. How do you gain separation in that area, and how significant is this point of emphasis, if any? And he said that this stat is such a tricky thing. It's really interesting because their first game, they didn't have time of possession for very long, but they were able to figure it out, and scoring is obviously what's more important. But it's going to be really interesting to see how that is going to come into play on Saturday when you want to play team football. You don't want your defense getting tired out. You want your offense being productive. So I think that we can also all agree on that sustained drives are the biggest point of emphasis for Alabama when it comes to offense, especially against Georgia's defense. So it's going to be fun. I'm excited to be there and share everything that I see from the sidelines.
One of the things that I thought was interesting that all three guys brought up, Mick Sheridan, Kane Wommack, and Kalen DeBoer, they all use some variation of discussing the continuity with Georgia's staff, this being their 9th season compared to Alabama, this being their first season. And the fact that you got that kind of, they all three brought it up at various points. I felt like that was kind of an important piece that people need to be paying attention to.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. And I think it is important to emphasize that this Georgia staff, they know each other. They have that game experience. Now, with that being said, I think a lot of people forget that Alabama staff that's here right now, they have been together, maybe not all together at once, but they have been on those same staffs for a very, very long time. So I do think there is some continuity on Alabama staff, but it's nothing compared to what Kirby Smart has going over at Georgia. And I remember, last year, Coach Freeze brought up how he couldn't believe that in year 2 of the program, Kirby Smart was able to do such crazy things. In year 9, I'm still not shocked about what Kirby Smart is able to do. So it's going to be really interesting to see just the differing in coaching styles come Saturday as well.
What's surprising to me is that Alabama's offense is just statistically so much more successful than Georgia's, except passing. And who would have thought that Georgia would be slightly better on the passing side of the ball than Alabama? I mean, you're talking about, 256 to 228, but a couple things that I would worry about if I was Georgia. Third down conversions, they're only converting 39% of those. And then in the red zone, Bama's at 81% conversion rate. Georgia's 88th in the country at 58%. And I mean, to me, that seems like you don't score touchdowns and you don't convert third downs against Alabama, you're in trouble.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that one thing that was emphasized by Coach Sheridan was whoever executes the best will win this game. That's what it's going to come down to. And I agree with it because you have two very fundamentally sound teams. Now, what's interesting is when you look at what Georgia was, unable to do against Kentucky, Coach Wommack said that Kentucky didn't do too much. It wasn't this crazy defensive scheme. They just were able to execute, and they did a really good job of that. So I think when we talked about this on the message boards over at covercrimson.com, if you want to check it out, but something that I'm looking at is how these secondaries and receivers are going to match up, because we have said how, Georgia's wide receivers aren't their strength per se, but Alabama's defensive backs aren't their strength either. So with that deep ball, I'm really curious to see how that's going to play out. And I think it's going to be a dogfight, and I'm going to agree with Coach Sheridan, obviously, that whoever executes this is going to take the win on Saturday.
Obviously, Kalen DeBoer's had some opportunities to play some SEC style defenses, but being in the SEC, he talked a little bit about what makes the SEC different compared to a lot of the other conferences. Can you elaborate a little bit on his answer there?
Yeah, I love what he said. And I actually have it written down. He said, you have top tier draft picks every Saturday, basically. Like, you're coming in, you have depth. If some guy is tired on the bench, you're sending in just absolute depth of talent. And he has that on this roster. Obviously, he brought in some guys with him from Washington. You have some guys that hit the transfer portal. You also have some great freshmen. So for Coach DeBoer, I would love to pick his brain a little more about what his perspective was even deeper on the SEC. And even watching Georgia and Alabama when he was at his other coaching stops, like, what did he think about these guys? And now he's in this role. So the depth in the SEC, we all know it's crazy. I mean, I remember my first game covering an SEC was about a year ago. It was it was Bama, Texas. And the sound of the hits on the sideline, guys, it is so much louder than anything I'd ever experienced. It sounds like bulldozers. I was in the Sun Belt. I love the Sun Belt. But even just the sound of these players is different.
I got the vibe this summer just from some comments that Kirby Smart made that, he's not so worried about Kalen DeBoer. And I don't know if that's maybe how I read it or not, because we keep talking about Nick Saban. I wonder if for Coach DeBoer, which he's a nice guy, but he's super competitive, if this isn't his opportunity to kind of separate himself a little bit from the comparisons all the time to Nick Saban. I mean, people even mistakenly call him Nick Saban sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it's interesting. I was going to ask him if we were able to get a second question and what his perspective is on Kirby as a coach, as a person, what their interactions have been like. For Kirby, this is a game going 1-5 against Coach Saban. You don't want to start off 0-1 against Kalen DeBoer. And I think that in a way, Coach DeBoer is playing with house money a little bit. Obviously, they're in Tuscaloosa. There's definitely a benefit there with the crowd. He actually called upon the crowd and fans to show up and show out. But it is going to be a little different to see Kirby Smart and Kalen DeBoer on the sidelines, not Nick Saban. And I think it is an opportunity for Coach DeBoer. I think that he already had a glimpse of that in Wisconsin about having that big first statement win. Now this would be, the icing on the cake to get a win against Kirby Smart in his first game against him.
EG, thanks for hanging out with us. I know you cover Auburn as well, and Clint really enjoyed this Auburn football season. So I guess I wanted to ask you I'm sorry, Clint. Mick's enjoyed this off season too. What can you tell us about our friends down on the plains? Are they ready to fire Hugh Freeze and go get a new coach? I mean, what's going on down there?
I feel like the better word is frenemies instead of friends. I don't know if you but I am unbiased with my coverage. So Auburn, they are going through some things, especially with the quarterback situation. I was not down there today for Coach Freeze's press conference, but the overall mood after the game on Saturday, guys, it's not good. I'll be quite frank with that there is a serious lack of, I don't even know what the lack is, but lack of something when it comes to the quarterbacks, the development of them, the development of now the running backs apparently, and it's really tough to see a game like that and then hear some comments that were made about those players on the field by their head coach. I can't imagine, being a player in that position and having to, hear we need a quarterback that's not going to throw it to the other team and we need a running back that's not going to drop the ball.
Yeah.
Now, especially when it comes to ball security, I'm not going to pretend I'm a coach. I'm not going to pretend like I am the most, elite ball knower there is. That's a practice issue. That comes down to practice drills and how well you're emphasizing it while you're in practice. And this quarterback situation, it's no secret that Auburn was struggling last season. And Coach Freeze was very adamant that Peyton Thorne was his guy. Peyton was the guy. He was riding with Peyton because you brought in this caliber of wide receivers that it felt like maybe it would solve some issues. And they are talented guys, no doubt about it. I think for me, what was a little confusing and perplexing was the decision to start Peyton in the second half of that game over Hank Brown. Hank did not have a great first half, but at a certain point, when do you ride with your guy? When do you decide this is who I'm going with and we're going to see what happens? And I asked Peyton after the game, I said, what was the conversation like? Very short response. He looked at me and said, you're in, let's go. It's interesting, and I'm sure there is going to be some hopeful changes. I thought it was also interesting that Coach Freeze felt like at the half they didn't really need many in-game adjustments. Don't quote me on that. I need to go back and listen to it. That did catch my ear when I was sitting there, that at the half they felt like they were in a pretty good position. It was just turnover after turnover. I'm sitting in the press box, and I'm like, what is going on? What is going on? This game is just is insane. Clint, I saw your tweets and it was pretty funny.
What did you tweet, Clint?
Okay, it's a number of things. Could have been the Tyler Buckner comment. Is that what you're talking about? The turnovers.
It was the turnover one, and you're like, there's no way that something is happening. And I tweeted back, I was like, yes, Clint, I'm in the press box, and yes,
Yeah.
this is life.
Yes.
Clint's sneaky good with the twit.
He
tweets.
is. One thing that I
Twits.
chuckled about,
The twits. No, I'm just kidding.
one thing I chuckled about was Arkansas was having some serious snap issues. And I tweeted out, I said, Alabama fans, best piece of advice. If you have a chance, go just scroll through what people were saying. It was hilarious. Won't spoil those answers. But it was just it was an interesting game. Curious what you guys think about this weekend against OU. I still am in the camp that Auburn wins games that they shouldn't, and I'm not going to count this team out going forward. I don't think that there's a lot of guaranteed wins on their schedule, including Vanderbilt, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think this right here. Boop. 5 in a row, and then 4 straight losing seasons for these Auburn Tigers. It really is crazy that he's stuck by Peyton Thorne when they have all this money to go out and try to buy away all of the Alabama commitments. And I know that's a priority for those guys, but they don't have a quarterback. And in his system, you have to have a quarterback that can get the job done. And I don't know that he's going to be around long enough to get another quarterback if they continue to play like they've played.
Yeah, I mean, his contract details, I'm a little unsure of the, specifics, but Auburn still is paying, I want to say, Malzahn and Harson's buyouts. So if they can avoid that, I'm going to assume that they would like to.
Wow.
I think that would probably be a financial strain to be playing 3 buyouts, but I'm not sure if it's out to that point on the Plains. I will say, you mentioned, what is it, the 4th losing season potentially in a row? That would be.
Yeah, it would be, yeah. If they lose again, it'd be the 4th losing season.
So that would be the first time that's happened to Auburn since the 1940s.
Hey, wow. Wiggle, Clint.
But now listen, we all can agree that this is the same team that come Iron Bowl, even though it's in Tuscaloosa, something will change and suddenly it's a close game. Or they'll play Georgia.
Their close games are in down on
Georgia.
their place. They're going to take a country ass whooping this year. I'm sorry to say it, but I'm just these are the years where, and everybody knows these are the years that they come in and we're feeling sorry for them in the fourth quarter. Now, when we're down there, these type of teams always play us tough. I don't know why. It's like something inside that stadium.
Yeah. And I do have to give
Auburn
credit
Jesus, we call it.
where credit is due. That student section, no matter the score, they are in it from kick into the clock hit 0. And I will commend Jordan Hare, the fans, like that fan base is dedicated. And it's almost like, guys, you guys are so like good people. And like you stay the whole game. I hate it for you. I hate it for you.
You felt sorry for him. Well, don't. Let me just tell you something. Don't ever feel sorry for him.
Listen, my team is in Statesboro, and we were the first team to score an Ole Miss this season. The Georgia Southern Eagles, Gata, love the Sun Belt and Group of 5.
What's your schedule this week in Tuscaloosa? You going to be back?
Yes, I will definitely be back. I'm unsure. I think tomorrow, actually, I am going to head down to the Plains, get some player sound, see what's going on, check in with them. And then for assistance, I'll be back here. And then Friday, we're actually doing our live show. Don't quote me on time. I want to say 11 to 2 from Tuscaloosa over on the next round.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All righty.
Alrighty.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
Absolutely. Happy game week. This is so exciting. Week 5 is going to be a good one. No matter what game you're watching, it's going to be a good weekend.
All right. We'll roll tide. We'll see you.
All right. Bye, guys.
Emily Grace. Hanging out with us, Clint. You feeling sorry for Auburn? Their student section?
I mean, no. I don't think. I mean, I certainly don't think there would be a whole lot of feeling sorry if the roles were reversed. So, I mean,
They had the shirts that were like save Mike DuBose shirts for one of those Iron Bowls.
Yeah, I mean,
walking around.
And I mean, if this continues, we'll have to get some bumper stickers that say "honk if you beat Auburn," and there will be just enough of them. Anyways, I would the quarterback situation with Auburn is kind of why I originally thought Alabama would stick with Wilkin Formby. If you had planned to do that kind of rotation stuff like they had talked about,
right?
It's like, okay. The problem is if you bench Wilkin and then Elijah Pritchett comes in and he plays poorly, then you got to go back to Formby. I mean, his confidence is shot. It's very tough. Hey, get back out there. This guy's not any better. You go. And that's what Auburn found themselves in with Peyton Thorne. I mean, they put Hank Brown out there. He doesn't perform well in the first half. And then immediately it's like, I mean, she just said, didn't even have a conversation, really just, hey, you're up. I mean, good heavens, let's see if you can get out there and do better. And 10 turnovers and, at least 1 turnover on downs in 2 games against Power 4 teams, whether you're talking about Cal or whether you're talking about Arkansas on Saturday, that's not how you win football games. And they haven't won either one of those. So, Alabama against Georgia, got to win the turnover battle. Got to keep your guys confident. That's all really important.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Very interesting. As we start to pound towards this Alabama-Georgia game, but we always got to keep an eye on everything going on down on the Plains. And Adam, great comment. Free Gus Malzahn. I mean, it was his fault. I hated Gus Malzahn because he gave us so much trouble. And people were saying that if Arkansas doesn't have a good year, that it'd be Gus Malzahn going to Arkansas. But, we'll keep an eye on that. When you beat Auburn down on the Plains, if you're in Arkansas, put up a really good fight against Oklahoma State. Be interesting to see what happens. This is the toughest league to coach in, though. I mean, no doubt about it.
I mean, and anybody that's in Auburn, I mean, and even though Nick Saban's gone, I mean, one of the biggest problems for Gus Malzahn was always your 2 biggest rivals are Kirby Smart and Nick Saban. I mean, that's a tough situation to be in. Now Nick Saban's gone, but Kalen DeBoer, that's why Auburn fans are terrified, and it's understandable. It's like if that continues and Alabama continues to be Alabama, I mean, where does that leave them? As just far as the consistency factor and trying to build something that you can, respect on a year in, year out basis and stop going through these waves. And really, it hadn't even really been waves the last, 3 or 4 years. It's been mostly down. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing how different the situations are. but Alabama's got to continue to press forward because Georgia's going to be a tough test. There's no doubt about it. They're a good football team on both sides of the ball. They have their limitations. They have their areas that they can exploit, and we'll be talking about those more this week. But Alabama has some limitations as well, so I'll be curious to see how it plays out.
Yeah, me too. And I think the bottom line is this: perception wise, if Georgia beats Alabama, then the perception is going to be that the program slipped. I'm not saying they've slipped out of the top 10, but they've slipped out of the top 5, the top 3. If Alabama wins, then all of a sudden the perception is, hey, Nick Saban's gone, but this program's still there. And it's Alabama and Texas. And it may be Alabama and Texas and not Texas and Alabama. I mean, depending on what happens in the game. But Georgia's offense, and we kind of talked about this, is not close to Alabama's. Alabama's offense is much, much better. But defensively speaking, Georgia's is better than Alabama's. But it's not so far ahead that you're going, hey, man, Alabama doesn't have a chance. Now, Georgia's got the number 1 pass defense in the country. That's something that I think has a lot to do with their ability to get after the quarterback and then also put you in predictable passing downs. Their rush defense is good. It's not great. I mean, they're giving up 110 rushing yards per game, so that's in the 40s. So, so it's not like they're number 1. But at the same time, they're still really good. I mean, if you're limiting teams to, 110 yards, when you talk about quarterbacks being able to run the ball. But, I really think a lot of this comes down to Bama's ability to convert on third downs, score touchdowns, and then Georgia, their ability to try to do the same thing, which they haven't been that. I mean, maybe it's me, Clint, but I feel like Alabama on third down and scoring in the red zone makes them better than Georgia. And where I think both teams are really good.
Well, you look at I really don't think up to this point, Alabama has not played great quarterbacks. TJ Finley was terrible for Western Kentucky. Byron Brown is a good player, and he can put a lot of strain on you with his legs. He's not really just an excellent passer. And then, of course, we all know what happened as far as Tyler Van Dyke going down, for Wisconsin really early in that game. But from Georgia's perspective, Cade Klubnik, he played a good game this past weekend against NC State, but he's just been such a limited, inconsistent guy up to this point. They played, who was it? Tennessee Tech, I guess. And then you play this past weekend, 2 weeks ago, you played Brock Vandegrift, who Georgia had, seen him for years in practice. He had been with the Georgia program. So, I would say from a coaching perspective, the fact that they were familiar with him, even though he's also familiar with them, that's a huge advantage for coaches who know how to exploit it and take advantage of it more than an individual player would. So, and one of the big issues in the game against Clemson and, against Kentucky is that, that they couldn't really consistently keep the quarterback protected. And so that's going to be really important for Alabama. I think from an offensive line perspective, this is much different than anything Georgia's seen up to this point. From, Jalen Milroe's perspective, even though I do think there's some inconsistencies, the fact that he is easily the most dynamic player they've played up to this point, and he does have the ability to take advantage of you vertically, that's going to strain your defense a lot differently than anything they've seen up to this point. Like last year when they played Georgia, they had played Brady Cook, they had played Jackson Dart, they had played some really good quarterbacks. And so we knew that what we saw from them from a defensive perspective was what they were, whether it's against really good opponents or not so good opponents. This year, it's a little bit different. I'll be curious to see how that ends up, factoring in. But one of the big things, is they have to be able to keep Jalen Milroe protected, and he's got to do his job as far as taking advantage of what the defense is going to be giving him.
Yeah, 100%, man. Like and subscribe, guys. That's a way of saying roll tide. I'm going to roll through these comments before we get out of here. It's always great to have you guys on with us on Cover Crimson, and make sure that you are part of covercrimson.com. We're on there constantly on the message board, putting content on there. Clint, you're breaking things down. What do you guys got going on at Cover Crimson? And if you get the annual membership, you get one of these right here. Boom. This is the t-shirt. You get the Cover Crimson t-shirt with the annual subscription. So I like this one. My son has one. He was running around the house with it the other day. So I was like, hey, you know what? Looks pretty good on him. Hopefully it looks half as good on me.
Hey, Mick, where y'all going to be this weekend?
We are going to be at Innisfree.
Oh yeah,
show. So I'm doing, and I'm glad you brought that up because Friday, Jay Coker and I are going to be part of the Striker Strong golf tournament, and we are, really happy to do that. It's a great cause, and it's one of those things where I used to hear Jay Barker talk about Robbie Glenn and his son Striker and this rare genetic disease that he has, and basically trying to raise money so that, that kids that have this, their families can afford the treatments that it takes. Striker's never been out of bed. So we're doing that on Friday. We're gonna try to help raise awareness and raise some money for that. And then we're swinging over to Innisfree, and we'll be on, I don't know, somewhere around between 1 and 2 with our show. So if you're in town, swing by and see us Innisfree on Friday. It's going to be a pretty packed dais at Innisfree with all the different stuff going on, but we're part of it.
That's pretty cool that y'all are doing that. And you know what? I think I'm going to make the drive over there 2 days in a row because I'd love to see. I'm sure that Tuscaloosa is going to be electric this weekend, and then it's not starting on Saturday. I got a feeling Friday is going to be pretty wild too.
Dude, I know, man. I mean, like these are the days that you go to Alabama for school to be a part of. Like these are the events that you're like, you're so excited about just the, just the atmosphere that goes along with the game, on top of just the lead up to it. Sometimes is as fun as the actual game itself.
Yeah. And appreciate you, Adam, for the super chat. Mick apparently has mentioned multiple times that you have a better hat than me. So
this is a Bama tailgate show hat, man. Come get one.
Mine's just a simple Columbia. What I will say, the reason, if you see, I always wear Columbia hats. There's a reason for that. I probably need to get some customized ones, but I just love the way they fit my head. They're super comfortable. They're deep. I guess I got a big head. So, that's one of the big reasons I always wear Columbia hats, but I will say it's a really good looking hat, Mitt. And I, if I wore it, probably wouldn't look as good on me. B, wouldn't fit as well. So just be appreciative that you can rock those hats.
Yeah, well, maybe we need to get a Columbia hat and throw a Cover Crimson logo on it or something.
I love it. Now, see, if that ever happened, you best believe the Cover Crimson hats would never come off.
Yeah, no, that's pretty funny to me. Well, thank you, man. Thank you for the super chat, Adam, and appreciate you, man, being part of what we do. And we'll be on post game as well after the game. But if you're in Tuscaloosa, man, swing by. We'd love to see you, and make sure that you're a part of Cover Crimson. I mean, we're having a great time doing this, guys. We're putting a lot of energy into building this channel for you. We want this to be the place that you go for Alabama news, for talk and all of that stuff. So, Clint, it's been fun, and covercrimson.com is a big part of that.
Yeah, it is. And we're going to be doing a lot of stuff over there. Just as far as like the matchups, like, Stacy, as always, started talking about like the most important individual matchups that people are most excited to watch. Not necessarily the ones that are going to like decide the game necessarily. Maybe it's from an NFL talent, standpoint for me, and I'll be diving into one a lot more this week. I'll go ahead and give people mine, but there's been a couple of answers over there that I think is really interesting. Would love for people to get involved and share theirs over there at covercrimson.com. But for me, it's Jalen Walker and Mikael Williams. We think Williams has missed the last 2 games. He's expected to be back. So getting him back, having Jalen Walker, who plays, about 40%, a little over 40% of his snaps off the ball, from Georgia's perspective. I don't know why they do that. He's your best pass rusher, in my opinion. I would have him as an on-ball player on every snap, but they kind of use him, kind of a 50-50, 60-40 kind of split between off-ball and on-ball, but just him in those, obvious passing situations. Williams, as far as just being kind of an athletic freak, I think he's got top 10 upside as far as the NFL draft. Watching those guys against Alabama's tackles, how far along is Elijah Pritchett? How far along is Caden Proctor? As far as their development, are you going to see some Wilkin Formby? I would assume, outside of injury, you're probably not, but we'll have to wait and see. But how well do those guys hold up? Because, this is why winning the early downs is important too. If you can do that, stay ahead of the sticks, keep your playbook open. Georgia's pass rush with maybe a guy like Jalen Walker can't tee off on it quite as much. I think that's going to be really important. So if it's second, mediums, if it's third and shorts, you'll probably see more of Jalen Walker playing off the ball. And so if you're Alabama, that's what you want to see as much as possible.
All right, one final thing. I want to just give you guys more information on the Striker Strong Golf Tournament because I got the information pulled up here. But basically, it's Tatton Brown Raymond disease, right? And it's a disease, a genetic disease that obviously doesn't have a cure. And Striker Glenn is who we do all this for, but his dad, Robbie Glenn, played baseball at Alabama. They do the golf tournament every year at Bentry Golf Tournament. And check them out online, strikerstrong.org. If you want to donate, be definitely worth helping out, because I tell you, Robbie Glenn puts all his time and effort into this golf tournament to raise money. And it's a disease I never heard of before. But, he sends me pictures of Striker, who's, really tough kid. And you can't even imagine being a parent and having to deal with something like this and having to see your kids suffer. And so that's what we're going to be doing Friday. But anyway, shout out to Robbie, former Alabama baseball player, big Alabama fan, and a great guy in this golf tournament we're going to do Friday. All right, Clint, we have Elephant in the Room coming up later today. That is with Jake Coker, who's become the star of this channel in my mind. He is knowledgeable. He's funny, and we got him right here. So we're going to have that later today. We got Mike Johnson coming up later this week. What else do we got going on this week? Give us a breakdown here.
We are dialing back a little bit on the content. We kind of feel like we were overloading people. We just had so many different people putting out so much, 2, 3, 4 videos every single day. We're going to be pulling back on that a little bit, spending a little bit more time on the message board, doing a lot of the stuff that we were talking about in more written form. But, tomorrow, Chris and I are going to be doing the stock up, stock down. It's going to be a little bit different because there's no game to react to. Going to be more of a Georgia preview later on this week. I'm sure Stacy and I will hop on here and do a video together as well. It'll just be one. But, we still got a lot of content on this channel. It's just, it won't be, 3, 4 videos every single day. It just got to be too much. We got, Bama and Bourbon. We got, Respect the Process. We got the stuff that you do as far as Elephant in the Room and the All-American. Just a lot of different content on top of what you and I do. We just want to make sure that we're maximizing, the channel as much as possible. So, Mick, as always, I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody who listens. If you haven't already, like the video, share it wherever you possibly can. That certainly helps us. Especially if you haven't, go subscribe. We've been climbing as far as the subscribers. We've had a really good, first month, but now we're trying to get to, to that point. We're reaching that 5K mark, but we really want to do that as quickly as possible. As far as the subscribers, eventually want to get 10K after that. But Mick, as always, I appreciate you, buddy.
Hey guys, roll tide. Most importantly to you guys, it's fun talking. We'll do it again tomorrow. Roll tide, everybody, and we will see you. If something breaks, hey, you might see us again before tomorrow. You never know.